This is Space Cat's Peace Turtles, the unofficial podcast for Fantasy Flight's Twilight Imperium. Episode 92, Organizing Games with tgwelch. Music by Ben Prunty, featuring Matt Martins and Hunter Donaldson. I feel like the best place to start here is to talk about how this episode has been in the making for probably 5 months.
Has it really been that long where we've been talking
When
about...
did the tournament end? The tournament ended in April, right? So it's been since April.
Dude,
so
it's been a
3
blur
months.
for me since the tournament ended, basically. Like, I thought I'll wake up on Saturdays being like, oh, got a game, gotta watch somebody play for 10 hours.
Wake up in a cold sweat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have Tyler today. We got tgwelch, if you're familiar with the Discord. tgwelch was in the tournament, and you're one of our Space Kitties. We're doing a Space Kitty episode today. Tyler, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
What's going on? We're super. I'm stoked to have you because, boy, we were gonna record this episode literally like maybe the second week of May or earlier. And
here we are. It's when is it? What year is it?
It is currently 2040, and we're finally getting to Tyler's episode.
Oh wow, it's 2040. So global warming must have hit in like pretty hardcore at this point.
Yeah, the floor is lava, and it's and we're all doomed.
I'm in my underwater dome where I live by myself.
Love it.
We have a fun episode today because so the tournament just finished up, right? The Patreon tournament just finished, so this is a super topical episode.
Yesterday.
And we're going to talk about tournament. No, Tyler reached out to us right after that and really wanted to talk about some stuff in the tabletop simulator community, and so we've been. I mean, obviously, this episode has had more effort and thought put into it than any episode ever because we've had an outline for 3 months and have been all brainstorming it for that long. So prepare yourself for the most thought through episode. I'm already making it out to be more than it should be, and people are getting their standards up too high.
I've been thinking about this every day for as long for you said 2040, so
yeah, so 20
years.
21 years.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no pressure here.
No, to take the pressure off, I want to talk about Tyler for a minute, and I want to talk about the stuff of how many times Tyler Welch has played Twilight Imperium, and in what amount of time that has all taken place. So, Tyler, when did you start playing Twilight Imperium?
It's been about a year. Looking at the calendar here now, July 21st. So I learned it. It was the second board game I ever learned right after Terraforming Mars.
Wow.
So, number of games played. We started in person before I even learned about Tabletop Simulator. And it was the same group of guys. Never got a 6-player game in our group. It was always the same 4 people total. And between the 4 of us, that's probably why we were able to get so many games in, especially in a day, because we do them back to back. But I'd say easily 100 to 150 games in about a 2-month span.
Oh, my God.
Jesus.
That's horrifying, and we're going to take you to board game prison. But before we do that, so you've told us before, I guess, that eventually, you started to not be able to organize groups with those players anymore, so you had to find somewhere else to find players? Walk me through that.
Yeah, it probably makes sense to help you understand why I was able to get that many games in. I didn't work. I took about 5 months off of work, just kind of felt like throwing in the towel for my job for a bit, needed a break. And before I
decided to go work at the Twilight Imperium factory.
Exactly. But the guys, they were my buddies back home in California, and they're retired cops, so they had a lot of free time, and they loved games. We played poker initially. We were a big poker group, and then that segued into this once I introduced them to Terraforming Mars.
Cool.
So how did you discover that you wanted to play on Twilight or on Tabletop Simulator pretty much constantly?
After a while, I became the rule guy, and I learned everything, probably studied the rule book on this thing through and through. And again, this is before I met some of the gurus that are out there that, managed to correct me even online still to this day. But for our group, I was the rule master, basically, because I was fact-checking everything on the TI Discord.
Right.
But I wasn't playing yet on tabletop, and then after a while I think they were just getting tired of losing to me, and they introduced other games, and we played a lot of different stuff, but nobody was really finding it fun anymore. So yeah, that led to me getting on Tabletop Simulator to find some more competition.
Wait, so did they move on? Like, did they not play TI anymore, these three people that you started with?
Well, the guy that bought the board he went on to like Etsy and got a custom made like tile placement table, which I own now. And then he bought the dice tower and all the good fix ups, and he basically sold it all back. He doesn't play it anymore.
Wow.
Basically fell apart. The glue left. I moved to Texas, and they don't play anymore.
That's so funny.
So if you could, I just want to start this off on the best foot possible. If you could even try to estimate how many individual games of Twilight Imperium do you think you've played?
Collectively? Gosh, I haven't looked at my hours logged on tabletop in a while, but collectively, probably 250, 300 by now.
That's mind-numbing. In a year. In basically less than a year, like 250 to 300 games. So what you've learned in all of those games is how to find the players that you like to play with, I would assume. I would imagine there's many people you've played with, and we're not going to sit here and like try to like, run roughshod over anybody, but like you found players that didn't sync with your personality type and your style. We've all been there. So I want to first talk about like, how do you approach, especially in the tabletop simulator community, where you're just kind of like hopping on the forum for the first time and like don't know anybody? If you were to encourage someone, like how do you suss out the players you want to play with and don't?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I first started, I just kind of did it the standard way, right? Go to the LFG and do that, and it would take a while. I'd have days that I would hope to get a game started early in the morning so that I could be done by the time, my girlfriend gets home from work, because God forbid, you don't want that to bleed into to QT. But no, man, truthfully, that was the way that it went. And then after a while, playing so many times, you'd start to see a lot of the same names. And, I'm way more about having a good time with people and making sure that, we gel well and there's some good personalities at the table when you spend that much time in a game. So that initially kind of became it, and I kept a little bit of a log mentally for the most part, and then kind of wrote down some notes here and there about some of the players that were really, I guess, the top favorites that I'm buying personally. And then I would just do some PMs and send them invites to see if we could try to organize a game. And I think it was really patience as a virtue. He's the one that kind of started this whole thing, because I got some invites with him after a while because we had played so many games together that I was hoping I could be a part of those games, and that's kind of where the ball got rolling from right there. And then after a while, I kind of built a book of names that were guys that we played quite a bit with, and then from there, it's been growing.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about like what about this specific group like kind of draws you to them, or made you want to like, I want to play with these people, basically. Like, what are their qualities that made that appealing to you?
Yeah, no, so I guess dating back to how I got into the TTS segue was more competition. So I like, the guys that, or girls. I don't think we've ever really played with more than one or two females, but I definitely look for the more skilled, highly competitive players, because that's really my core DNA. Definitely would never claim to be the most skilled at this game. It's got an infinite skill level. Truthfully, I don't think you can ever master it. It's just play style. I think everyone has their own unique play style, and I like to learn from others that are, way more advanced in their play style and their skill level.
Yeah.
But that was the big catalyst on top of, or at least the main reason that I invite other players. But it's that, and then I like, I'm a laid back kind of guy personally, so I like to just look for a good group of people, crack some jokes. There's some games where, I'm eliminated by round 2, and, I probably had a couple too many whiskeys by that time, but was looking to just have fun,
That's cool. So you're kind of at a point with this group where like you can hang, but sometimes like they still still get the best of you. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's probably rare that I take the win in most of the games. I've had a couple rolls where, when they say it rains it pours, but the droughts are long, my droughts are long. But I get on a 1 or 2 or 3 game win streak. It's tough to knock certain players off their win rolls like 7. He knows who he is, but he's typically the guy that takes down a W in our group.
Cool. Well, so if you would say, like, let's say there might be some people listening to this that are like playing a lot of TI on TTS, and maybe they don't have access to, the level of skilled players that you have access to. What are some things that maybe they can do that would like help them kind of break into? Because like you're saying, you're not even, you're playing a lot, but you're not like, you're not outpacing these people at every moment. So there must be other people that are possibly in that position. What are some things you think that maybe they could do to like start playing more with more skilled players?
You said on TTS?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
like on TTS.
I think it's really to just have the open mindset, and the definition of insanity is expecting a different outcome, right? When you keep doing the same thing, and it's hard to get that kind of knocked out of your mind in this kind of a game because it requires a lot of thought. And I think for me, it was more so certain games just knowing I wasn't going to win, but maybe just focus more on, the names that I knew were winning quite a bit more, and watching what they did, when they did it. Timing windows became huge. And as we learned with the multiple iterations of rule sets and how that happens to affect the game too. But really, honestly, it became more of like a subject in school, and I like to just study and I like to learn. So that's something personally about me that not just for this game, but I like to learn. So I figure I can learn from different people.
Yeah.
And have
So
different styles.
the tricky part of Tabletop Simulator and the Tabletop Simulator Discord that has been set up, it's the Twilight Imperium for Tabletop Simulator group. It's not matchmaking, right? It's not a proper matchmaking. There's not like a good way to definitely formulate a great group. So I'm wondering, when you are organizing these games, I think maybe some people need a sort of guide on like how much time should they expect to, like how much notice should they give when they are wanting to organize the games? Because I think where people run into trouble is it's like, oh wow, it's 10 a.m. on a Thursday. I don't have work today. Maybe I'll just jump into a game of Twilight Imperium. And that's certainly possible on the Tabletop Simulator community. But when you're trying to get a group of people together where you're like kind of cultivating the people you specifically want to play with, how far in advance are you planning that for the Tabletop Simulator community?
It depends on the day of the week. By now I've got a log, and I have pretty much a general availability of all the people that I routinely play with. But I think that it's probably anywhere from 3 to 5 days is the lead time that I'll put on it, but depending on the game. Yeah.
That's good to know. And it's interesting to know that you have a log. I feel like that's almost something that needs to start becoming a community resource, is like, what are people's general schedules so that people can know, like, oh, if I want to play with, so if I want to play with tgwelch, these 3 nights of the week are going to be the best nights to like try to find an open day. Maybe I'll avoid doing something on a Thursday night so that I can definitely play with this small group of people. So I'd love to see the community come together and put something like that together. But maybe we should dip into a little bit of the sour subject, which I don't think we want to name names or anything, especially because we're gonna find good ways to talk about this. But there's obviously people have played with people they don't want to play with ever again. And this happens in person too, right? I mean, it's just like if you go and play with a bunch of strangers, sometimes your style doesn't gel with someone else's. So how do we avoid things like just a straight up blacklist? Because I think that's something that gets recommended a lot, which is just like, well, if you don't like playing with someone, don't ever play with them again. And that in an online community where we're trying to cultivate like a welcoming atmosphere, that's not the best way to go about it. So, I mean, what's your approach when, the game ends and there's maybe 1 or 2 players where it's just like, that didn't go well with so-and-so?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the blacklist word, I mean, that's a pretty strong word for the online world.
Yeah.
I personally don't have a blacklist per se. I just know that there are a handful of folks that, I've had rougher games with, and sometimes it's not even me. Like, I'm totally okay with letting anybody back into a game, but sometimes some of the more frequent players in these types of organized games that I'll set up, it will have some sort of influence on that save too, and that becomes an issue because we want to keep everybody working and the good synergy between the table. So in those situations, I don't just do the I'll just block them out, but I'll sometimes just send them a private message and be like, hey, we just had some comments, and if you want to get back into the game, I'm totally cool with it, but here's some of the things that were said, and if it's possible, maybe we could just kind of work on that. And I've actually had positive outcomes from that before where, certain folks have been reinvited back into the game and have not had those types of issues before or again. So.
Yeah. So basically when somebody demonstrates like poor etiquette in Twilight Imperium, your approach is to just talk to them like an adult, right?
Yeah, weird, right?
It's a strange approach.
This is mind-blowing. I'm gonna write this down, that if you have a problem with someone, you can actually just talk to them about it. And I might get a tattoo of that now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, right.
I think a great question would be like, I don't know. Okay, have you, tgwelch, I don't know how many of the games that we have on our YouTube have you ever watched, but there's one that we reference a few times where Hunter.
Oh, wow. This is what you're doing?
I'm doing this.
You're going to just call
me
out
wanna,
right now?
No, I'm not
After
calling
I've already
you out.
Called myself out several times.
I know. I would like to know, Tyler, what would your approach be in a game, or maybe it's only after a game? I guess that's the question I'm asking is that the kind of thing, like, do you like call out someone's etiquette mid-game, or is it kind of like let the storm move on and then come back to it later? Or is it something that's like, has it ever been bad enough in a game where like someone has to be called out in game?
It's a really interesting question. I'll tell you, like, I'm not going to sit here and stand high and mighty because I'm definitely no angel myself. I've had my moments where I'm very easy, but I'm reactive. And I've had instances where, round one, guy tries to take my home, was successful and really pissed me off. And it led to me going on and just dedicating my game to total elimination.
Right.
And was successful at that. And then, they dropped, and they just, dropped. Yeah. No announcement of it. So, I'm definitely not perfect at the table etiquette discussion part in some instances, but I, in that particular game, made sure I apologized to the group, and a lot of those guys are part of the organized group that I still play with. So, right. It's not a big deal. I think that the whole theme here is that I just believe in, making sure that if you have someone that just, drops from the game unannounced, go about it the usual way, which is try to find a replacement. And if we can't do that, we'll just keep the ball rolling and then, deal with one less player. But maybe sometimes they're more vocal and they stick around and become a problem for the table. Then, it's sometimes we've had to kind of stop and have those types of discussions just right there at the table, just to kind of cool the jets and keep the game moving. And right. I've never really had an issue beyond that, if ever that became an insertion point in the game. So, but usually it's more so like there's got to be some sort of follow-up afterwards, right. too, to be like, hey, that wasn't cool.
And I ask all of this not to discourage anyone from, like, I don't want to scare anybody off of the Tabletop Simulator community. More so, I want to encourage everyone to take this same approach of, just talk to each other like adults about these things, and there's no need to just ban people from the community. Right. And it's more about some people come to the table with these different expectations. So for someone who's only played, 2 games of Twilight Imperium and now they're jumping on Tabletop Simulator, like they should be joining a different kind of game probably than maybe someone who's like looking to do some cutthroat elimination round 1. Like those are 2 different types of players that don't need to be in the same game together. I think there's a misconception that happens in the community that like everything is viable and that anything can happen in any game, and that's sort of true, but also it's true within your own community, right? So like the example I've been using recently is when Hunter and I play in Good Yin Brotherhood games, I don't have a very strong interest in eliminating anyone. We had that recent game where we the reason we did the Soul versus Yin episode last week was because we played a Good Yin Brotherhood game, and I was kind of like jumping all over Fargonis, but I could not bring myself to eliminate Fargonis because, well, the guy paid me to be in this game, so I'm not really gonna just like make his, it's like, all right, you're done in an hour, get out of here, scrub. So I'm not interested in that. So it's a different context. So if you're the kind of player who's like, no, I came to be a part of this whole thing, I want to play with the type of people who don't just like straight up eliminate round one. I'm not interested in that. I want to encourage people that there are other people looking for those types of games too, and you just need to seek them out and find them. And when you play a game with a group of people that you like, follow up with them. Remember the people you like and play with them again. So it needs to be less about blacklisting players you don't like, and it's more about really like jump on the players that you do like and find ways to play with them again. And like Tyler said, give it a few days notice if you're really wanting to get a specific game together. Reach out to them a week or 3 to 7 days ahead of time to just like, hey, is there any way we can get a game together specifically? Because you don't need to force yourself into situations where you're always playing with strangers. That is kind of a recipe for disaster, because you're not going to get along with everybody in the community because everybody has a different play style. So I want to make sure people know we're not coming at this from a negative standpoint. It all ends up being about like encourage you to just play with the people you like and find them. And maybe that sounds really obvious, but it can feel like there's not that many people out there. Especially when you're used to that in like your local group. Like for me in Fayetteville, it's like it feels like we don't have hardly anybody to play with. So, we'll take who we can get. But in the tabletop simulator community, you can find more people than just that. So always just keep looking. I kind of want to segue off of that into we've been framed a lot on Tabletop Simulator, and maybe we can pull back for a second because there's a lot of people who aren't going to play on Tabletop Simulator. And I just wanted to throw out like ideas for people looking to get better at organizing their games in real life. So I don't know, Hunter, there's a note we have written down, and I think it's the most important note. And I want to know, what's the most important thing if you're trying to organize a game of Twilight Imperium with a group of people?
Well, just in case, I know a lot of you listen to this show but don't know what Twilight Imperium is. I know we actually have a huge, a lot of our listener base, a lot of our listener base doesn't know about the game. No, I'm just kidding. Make sure you have time to play because it's a long game, you dummy. I kind of want to try and frame this a little more like in terms of Tyler, though, because one thing that I thought was interesting about what Tyler was saying about his group is that it sounds like when you started, Tyler, you had like 3 just kind of ride or die, like this is my group, and we all came into this game together. And one thing that I think is interesting about that is how me and Matt came into this as well.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, let's say you were, for some reason, I don't know why you would be listening to the show right now and be starting Twilight Imperium for the first time, and then this is the episode you checked out. But let's say all those things are true. If you were going to start playing Twilight Imperium today, I think the first thing would be actually to just get your friends interested in it, before, and try and come into the game as a group, because I think there's a real like magic in that. Yeah. And there's almost I think this episode maybe doesn't have the most solid through line to it, but one thing that I feel like we're talking about a lot is just like kind of how special and good it is to play with kind of the same people over and over that you kind of know and are kind of developing alongside. So I would say if you have a group to come into the game with, that's always the better way to do it, right?
Right. I always frame it as Twilight Imperium is the Super Bowl of board games. And if you're not from America, I mean, people know what the Super Bowl is, but the point is that it's an event. It's a thing that like people are expected to show up, and that's what we're doing today. That's like our whole MO. And to like go bigger than just the game when you're playing it. Like Hunter's saying, make it a group that you're just wanting to hang out with for 8 hours. So, bring your own beer. Who's bringing the chips and salsa? Like, get all of those things. Treat it as a whole day, not as a just like, oh, come over and play Twilight Imperium. It is about a lot more than that, because it's about like, we're going to have really weird dynamic relationships with each other for this entire day. And just the things you need to plan for to make that a comfortable experience. Plan for a pizza phase, just all these things where it's like, be ready to experience the whole day together. It's not just about like, oh, we got to get in the game. So like, make sure everybody shows up and we're going to make it as quick as possible. That's not when Twilight Imperium is fun. When you have a 4-hour time limit, Twilight Imperium is almost never fun in that scenario.
Absolutely.
I got a question actually for Tyler though. When you were playing with that 4-player group, you said you guys were knocking out several games in a row. Like how many, when you say that, do you mean like 2, or like could you guys like because 4-player games can go pretty fast, and it sounds like you played a lot of 4-player, which obviously I detest on like a very strong level. I spit up a little in my mouth when you said that, but
that I figured you might, but no. Our run in one day was 4 games, so it was about an 18-hour day.
Wow.
So we started at like 7 a.m. and I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 a.m. by the time I got home. It was crazy.
Terrifying.
But I was going to just kind of comment on how to play more in real life. If you don't have a group, which, we had our set group and they kind of faded out and wanted to do other things or didn't want to play as frequently. And I was still, just fiending for this game. So I needed to play more.
Yeah.
My girlfriend and I used the Meetup app, right? And we just kind of put a listing out there, came to find that in Southern California, there were quite a lot of people that played Twilight Imperium based on the big major cities out there. Found a board game shop nearby that just, threw it out there. Hey, who wants to come out? Got, 2 new players that showed up that day, and that kind of segued into us building a regular group out of those 2 players and all their friends. And then we set up a lot more 6-player games, which I finally got to get 6-player IRLs back before I moved here to Texas. So
Yeah, I have a similar thing of when I was on a job for 4 months in Jackson, Mississippi one time, and same thing, joined a meetup group that was just a board game group because I was looking for things to do on the weekends while I wasn't working but was still trapped in Jackson, and found a group there, and then ended up from that group, because it was like a huge board game group of like, I don't know, like 20 people, but from that group we had a reliable game every other weekend, and I was playing Twilight Imperium, multiple times while I was in Jackson with this group, and built a pretty cool relationship with all those people. This is in 2014. This is during TI3, so this is before kind of the new popularity of TI4. So it's only easier to accomplish that these days.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, board game shops are pretty magical, man. Like prior to getting into board games, I played a lot of Magic the Gathering. I grew up on that game from when I was like 7 till about 25. I was really into it, and Friday Night Magic that's kind of their worldwide known way to get and interact with new players, find different levels of competition. So I just went back to my roots and was like, let's go to a board game shop. And kind of funny, like in that actual example of the meetup group that I found, there were probably 3 or 4 people that stopped by and were just watching our game.
Right.
And, they were customers in the store, but one of the guys gave me his name and number. He's like, I want to play this game.
Yeah.
I've never played TI4. And I'm like, dude, absolutely. I'm going to put you in our next game.
Yeah, that's the magic of TI, is like people have heard of it and people know about it, and it's just sort of this like mythical beast to them. So for me, it's always about encouraging them to join. It always be inviting to new players in person or on Tabletop Simulator, because as long as you connect with them on a personal level, they're going to find enjoyment out of it. I see people all the time try to say like, don't encourage someone to play if they've never played a board game before. But it's like you said, this is the second, mainstream, not mainstream, but the second board game you've ever played. And it was kind of the same for me. I had really only played like Axis and Allies before I got into Twilight Imperium. So it's certainly, Axis and Allies is it's in itself a beast. But the point is, I've gotten people to play with Hunter and I that didn't play any board games at all, but they were the type of people I knew we could hang out with for 8 hours. So as long as you have the right expectations for what those people are going to bring to the table when they come and play, you can still have a great time. So it all comes down to whatever your group is willing to do to get more people in it. But I just encourage everyone to get out there, and it's a social game. So you probably have to get a little social to find more players.
Yeah. I'm wondering something like, so it sounds like you play a lot with a lot of very experienced people, but I'm wondering, do you approach the game any differently if like let's say you're in a game with a couple new people, or maybe even just one new or how about this? What if I was in your game with all of these like cutthroat killers? Would your approach to the game be any different? Or are you kind of one, and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer to this. I'm actually just kind of curious, like stylistically. Are you one of those people that feels like you kind of give a helping hand, or I don't, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Again, you kind of mentioned it earlier, Matt, but like it's a social game. I'm a very social person. It's my job. I'm a sales guy, so I'm on the phones and doing meetings all the time, and it's my nature. But you can see, especially the more games under your belt, you have more experience, and you can tell when there are those that are less experienced at the table, especially in real life. And I definitely am usually the person that's like, if you see something that maybe they shouldn't have done, they had a better option and they just don't quite see it because you know how big this game can be. I always like to ask the table first that, is it okay if we give constructive criticism after a play is made? Not that, help someone strategize on the fly, but make sure, because how are you going to learn, right? And, it's unfortunate that not everybody does that because it would probably make people maybe even like the game more. So totally see it that way for newer players, but then anybody else, if it's the more strategic guys, like everybody knows their game, right? That has a good level of experience in this one. So it's just respecting the other players, really. And I like to, at that point, the more dynamic players, the guys that we play with more routinely online, I like to feel them out socially when they're my neighbors, or they're the people I have to at least interact with the most throughout the game. I like to get a good level of understanding of what they're going to say yes to and what they're going to say no to, so that I know how much harder I can push on my ask for the next request, and kind of see how far they're going to bend before they get to the no point.
I like that. I like what you said about because I think a lot of people just give a lot of front end advice whenever they're playing with new players, and I feel like it is probably a lot more. It's more of a long-term strategy to look at somebody and kind of talk about their play after the fact, basically. I think sometimes when new players approach a table, more experienced players will almost kind of play for them. So I really like what you said versus what I think is kind of a common issue, I think, in teaching Twilight Imperium, which is, I think, really difficult anyway.
It's really important to get that, like, consent for accepting your help. And you should almost ask it every time. It's like, hey, do you want me to do you want an advice for this moment? And then later on, getting permission to give them advice one time is not permission to play their game for them. So I do agree. It's like really important to kind of keep that up. And when they want it, yeah, you can be the kind of person who's ready to do it. But having both sides of that coin is really important because it's going to help the new players, but it's also not going to push someone away that's like, I hated playing that game because, one player was just not letting me do anything without them having a say in it. And both things can hurt the experience. So it's important to be ready and able to help, but not pushing it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you say this too, because it probably wasn't the way it was when I first started. I told you I was hyper competitive and really getting into this when I first learned about it. But it's probably worth mentioning that another person in that core group of mine back home that we played so many in-person games with is my girlfriend, and we live together. So we have had some very interesting bouts in this game.
Yeah.
And one in particular was, I guess maybe it's more the opposite of this, but also making sure you don't tell the table if you do know what they're trying to score. And I took that away from her when she had a chance to win the game, and it really pissed her off because I took unveil flagship out of her ability to score when I told someone to use a skilled retreat.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's certainly a line that can be crossed with like giving help. It's almost not even just about is that player cool with you giving help, but it's like, hey, is everyone else cool with me giving help? I know that's something I get accused of pretty often, is because I'm that kind of player too, where I sort of just start helping a new player as much as I can without kind of doing the due diligence first, and then I get players like, I don't know, like Hunter Donaldson, who will say things like, now Matt's just trying to coerce you into the things he wants you to do. I want to also give you this advice because this advice won't directly hurt me. And I think that is kind of a pretty fair stance to take, is like maybe two people should be offering the advice at the table if it's at all possible.
Yeah, no doubt.
I feel like that scenario you just set up was fairly dishonest, and that not to make this about me and you, but it does feel like you keep trying to make it about me and you are clearly doing that. I'm not doing that at all. But to respond a little bit to this unwarranted criticism, all of a sudden lobbed at me in the middle of us.
No, it's a
recording
criticism
an episode,
on me. It's
in
a
the middle
on me.
in the middle of us recording an episode that has nothing to do with that. First of all, I just want to say you're petty. Second of all, I just want to say that the way that scenario normally plays out is it's exactly like how you described it, except for I don't give a whole lot of advice, and I don't really like to. I just like to point out when I feel like you're leaving something out or being devious.
No, that's true.
I generally don't like to. I also am not a very good talker. When I play, I have to like consciously like remember to like actually talk to the other players,
right?
Because I feel like I get in my head a lot.
I think I called you out for that in our Gideon Brotherhood game one time. You were my neighbor as ghosts, and I think I did one or two things early on to kind of tick you off, and I think you were trying to score like the 3 command counterpoint, and I made sure that oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank right now. Everybody in the world knows the name of this card, but the one where you get rid of a token.
Insubordination.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
you just have a perfect card to ruin my round.
You got real quiet, and I jokingly made a stab at that. I was like, "Hey, you're for the funniest guy on the no offense, Matt, but the funny guy on the podcast. you're sure quiet in this game. What's going on, man?"
Yeah, people always expect me to talk a lot more, but yeah, I think that I have trouble keeping all of Twilight Imperium in my head. Mm-hmm. So like if I'm talking, I'm probably not doing. I'm either
thinky bits
messing up. If I'm talking too much, I'm definitely messing up.
Right.
But yeah, no, and also I tend to get salty. I'm a salty player. Like if there was a blacklist for saltiness, I can't guarantee that I wouldn't be on it. You know. And sometimes it's like on record, like on YouTube forever. I don't understand why I don't just take that video down. I have the authority to do it. Like, there's nothing. If I take that down, it's not like Matt has that video sitting around somewhere.
No, I definitely
it will be
don't.
Gone forever. Anyways, like I'm not on the YouTube right now thinking about doing that, but
I'm not clicking the button as we speak. So we have this whole other kind of topic to break down, and I feel like it's a really, really super meaty topic that we don't have time to like give the due diligence to, but I think we still wanted to talk a little bit about like, well, we're talking about organized games. How does this lead into the idea of a competitive system within Tabletop Simulator or within Twilight Imperium at large? This was something that at the end of our tournament, Root was like super opposed to. He thinks the idea of a league or anything like that is like the worst idea ever.
I think I'm with him now.
Right.
I think he's right. I don't think leagues are. I don't think they're possible. First of all.
Right.
But I also don't think they're a very good idea. I think trying to measure Twilight Imperium over that long of a scale for like one person is, I think, kind of just difficult.
Well, and the biggest issue with it is a league insinuates like a ranking system and a score outside of just the fact that you won a game, which that means you're rating a player based on their points, which all of us know you've been in a situation where you were at 5 points but had just as much of a chance to win that round as anybody else. So TI is not a game that functions on a quantitative level, right? You either won or you didn't, and that's it. That's completely it. So how, I don't know what a structure for competitive play could even look like. And I'm curious, Tyler, if you're a group that does all these organized games, what they have thought about this in the past, or if they've also kind of shied away from it, or what your take on that is.
Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely agree on the no leagues thing. I think it sounded good on paper, but it would just be really tough to sustain. But it's also gotta aside to it that really plays more negatively, I think, than positively. But I think on the organized side, like again, we're talking for me purely just personal perspective. So it's because I really like more skilled competitive games. Again, learning from players that I know are better than me, and I like to play with them more frequently so that I can just learn more things, right? To kind of hone my play style to make it better for future purposes, especially, we've talked about, or at least you guys have talked about, more tournaments down the road and talked about, potentially, I think you brought this up, Hunter, about, the comedy bits and how you guys try to get your skits through submission of, yourself and to try to get brought into a gig or something like that.
Yeah.
But if we could do that in these organized groups, I think that that'd be a good way to kind of help people, put a different expectation on how they're going to play these games. And then if they want to be in organized types of group games, open to all, truthfully, but it's also knowing that, when you guys say we're going to put another tournament on for X date, like we know that there's a way that we can get qualified for that. So I think that that's a cool way to do it. And not only just with the same group of, folks that I play with, the same like 10 or 15 guys, but open that up to anybody really. And that doesn't even have to be me kind of taking the leadership on organizing these games, but anybody can do that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think,
Hunter, can you talk about that? Comedy type thing?
So I think that one of the reasons that leagues don't sound very good is that there's this weird thing that Twilight Imperium changes so much when there really is like a second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth place, basically, I feel like. And I think a league kind of has to take that into account. So my idea for like a different way of possibly doing a tournament in the future is just having people tape a game where they felt like they played very well. Like it's literally like, someone that's playing that game with you is recording it on OBS or whatever. And then, if you did well, if you're the winner, then you take that tape and then you would send that in to an organizer. Maybe it's Space Cats, Peace Turtles, maybe it's whoever. And then the organizer, instead of having a tournament where everyone has to kind of come to, like they got to find, the open time in their schedule, and like coordinate all of this stuff. If instead it's literally you're just sending in a video of you playing, the organizer watches the video, and then the organizer just has to make the call, like, is this, was this win good enough? Or you might not even send in a winning tape. Maybe you don't even have time to send in a winning tape. You have a tape where you almost won, but it was very interesting. You made some good choices. And you're just trying to show that off, basically, to these organizers. And then the organizer, instead of, they can watch this tape whenever they want, and then also decide, like, all right, is this good enough to make it into like the 36 spots, basically, in this smaller tournament? I just think it would be a way to potentially save some time and also make it easier for people to organize, because the tournament, I mean, part of what made the tournament so difficult was just making sure everybody could be there for that. It's a very long, like, it's a big block of time that we had to figure out. What was 108 people?
108.
So we had to find big chunks of time where 108 people could all be doing the same thing at the same time. And that was essentially the challenge. And this would be a way to kind of sidestep a lot of that. And what I like about this system is that people probably aren't going to send in tapes of them not winning the game. I mean, I think there are potentially times where you would do that, but it makes it where the only thing we have to evaluate is one win, basically. Right. And then the other part of it is that it's clean in that, if you play more games, obviously those are more opportunities for you to get a better tape. But you also could just play one game and get a good tape out of it. And I like that just kind of binary of just like, you play more, you get more chances. But it really just comes down to this one time, which is very similar to comedy. In that in comedy, if you're going out a lot, those are more opportunities for you to do really well. But it's not, everything isn't determined just based on experience. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like a mixture of experience and your ability to do well under pressure. And I think that like there's something about that overlap that I really like, because I don't want it to just be, the most experienced player wins every single time. That's not as much fun, because we can always anticipate how it's going to come out if that's the case.
Right.
Everybody likes it to also kind of have this element of like it can be shaken up. Somebody could send in a tape that we've never heard of before, and their tape is just really good, and we're like, oh my God, who's this? And then they just like show up and it's great,
Right. Yeah, I think the reason Hunter and I gravitate towards this sort of system is because at the end of the day, tournaments we are going to organize are tournaments that are good for TV. And that's different than like your local board game shop doing a tournament, right? For us, it's like we kind of want to put on a good show. So that's not even to say you have to be a really talkative player, but it's like we want to see the players that do really creative stuff to win. And not even to say there's like metrics, but it's just the idea is that we have to find a way to shave off the fact that the prelims for the last tournament took like 2.5 months and, cost a lot of weekend. It's just a lot. Like, it's a lot for anyone to take on. Even if we as an entire community got better at putting together things, I think the community has talked about another way to do prelims would be if there are volunteer moderators that are kind of approved by the tournament organizer, that they can be a part of a bunch of different games that act as the prelims. And this is different than a league because it would still be structured prelims, but just the main thing being that like Hunter or I do not have to be a part of every single game. If there's a legion of 15 people that are willing to sit in games and moderate and basically make sure that a valid winner comes out of it or whatever, that's another system to approach this with. But it all comes down to needing even more communication between all of us as a community, right? It all leans on these Discord servers that we have, or Reddit or Board Game Geek, where we like really talk through these methods.
Yeah. The other thing is that these are all just ideas. I just want to throw that out there. This is not like, this is just, who knows? And actually, I kind of feel like, I don't know that this, like, in talking through this tape thing, this is just like kind of my best, the thing that was on the top of my head that seemed like, oh, this is like maybe a creative solution to this problem. But also, we have a lot more Patreoners than we did before, enough so to where we could have the clean prelims to semis to finals that we dreamed of without having to do the knockout round. That's now possible. Did you know that?
It's possible. Every single person on our Patreon would have to do it, but even more so, I mean, I would love to do just an open invitation tournament where anybody, I mean, that's basically what the Patreon tournament is. It's $1. But I mean, a 216 person tournament would be quite a feat.
Yeah. Maybe we could just quit our jobs. Like, we didn't have jobs.
That'll work.
What if we didn't have jobs, and then it would just be our job to figure all this out? Because the thing is, too, even if we did this tape system, we would lose something, which is that what's really cool about the first tournament is if you wanted to, and I don't know why you would. I mean, I know I certainly wouldn't watch it at this point because I was there already for enough of it. But if you wanted to, you could just decide, like, you know what? I'm just going to watch through the whole story again. Like, I'm going to start from game one and just watch the whole thing build up to that point. And we would definitely lose that if we found any way to cut around the prelims, because the prelims is when the prelims round is when it's all wild, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in the prelims, and then things kind of narrow from there.
Okay, I have a solution, Hunter.
Yeah.
So we have a person here with us who has a history of taking off work for 5 months and dedicating all of it to the Twilight Imperium factory.
Yeah.
Tyler, you're hired. Tyler,
I was gonna say
5 months. Have at it.
You guys to get through it.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're hired. That's it. We did it. Can you? And we're gonna give you the keys to the show too.
Perfect.
It's
you guys don't have to worry about it, man. I'll keep the lights on.
Yeah, perfect.
He's Tom Bodette.
All right, cool. Well, Tyler? Is there anything else? Is there anything else you want to put in this? You want to slam into your guy right here?
I guess the one last thing I would say is just along the lines of the organized gameplay, I think, again, it's really ultimately up to the individual and what they're looking for. But there have been some instances where it's not anything that would be personal. It's just that certain people that perhaps I just don't know. And being such a broad online community, I've had people reach out and ask to be considered for future games. And I've definitely made those accommodations. So I would encourage anybody that's kind of looking for, how to get into something like that, because they're looking for more, regardless of your skill level, just looking for more competitive games with some of the well-known names that are in this community that play pretty well. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to consider for future organized games. And if anything, would just like the whole theme of this episode really has just been, let's be more social than we already are. And if people are willing to take on more of a leadership role, and it's informal, it doesn't have to be anything major, but whatever you're willing to do when it comes to these organized group plays, I would encourage that, because I think it's super cool that this community has become what it is already. It's already way more bigger than it was a year ago when I first jumped in.
For sure.
I got a fun little question for you, actually, to kind of end on. If you were gonna book like a game, let's say you can't book yourself. Let's go ahead and take you out of it, and you can't book me or Matt. We're gonna watch it. We're gonna broadcast it. What 6 players would you tap to just like, let's all collectively watch these 6 players play?
Oh, goodness gracious.
Keep in mind, the 6 people you name, we're gonna make this happen. This will be a thing.
You're gonna book a game that we're gonna watch in August or whenever we can get these people together. So who would those people be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Apologize in advance for anybody that would hope to be on this list, but some of the
we'll do it
funnier.
Yeah.
I would definitely say Janor would need to be in that game. He's one of the funnier guys that just cracks me up when we play. You got to throw 7 in if you want to get some fireworks in your game. Patience is a virtue if you want like a sage at the table that is super friendly, but also is going to kick your butt if you're not paying attention. Mantis, got to throw Mantis in there, man. He's one of my favorite guys to play with. He and I have had quite a bit of a love-hate relationship, but it always ends on a good note. Where am I at? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Got 2 more spots.
Yeah, Zendog, one of my all-time favorites to play with. And he's one of the more skilled guys. I'd say he's got a unique style. He's very, very friendly, and he's one of my favorite people to negotiate with. So if you're looking for that always easygoing deal-making guy, you got to have Zendog at the table. Last, I don't even want to. I'm going racking the mind to find the 6th person, but I'd say I'd throw Root in there, man. I love playing with Root.
Yeah, whoa.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of him lately. I know he's busy, and I encourage that. Personal life takes precedent. But
it's not personal. It's because we have him on retainer.
Is he in the basement right now?
He's working on some stuff for us right now.
Cool. Reed's a good time though, man. I love playing with him.
That's perfect. Well, we are definitely going to do a stream in the future as soon as we... everyone who just heard your name being called out, I expect to hear from us soon. And we're going to do a Welch's curated stream, basically, of all 6 of you guys playing. So that'd be super fun.
I dig it. That was not in the prep track, by the way.
No, I know.
So.
I just
sprung that
out at him, and that it seemed like a really fun idea. So I was like, I want to throw this out here. I also like that. What I like about these 6 players too is that they were all over the place as far as like how they did in our tournament.
Yeah.
So this is we wouldn't necessarily have put all of these together, and that's why I wanted to ask you. You know what I mean? These are a mixture of people that didn't make it through the prelims, and then some semifinalists, a finalist, and then Root, who didn't even play in the thing.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. Make sure I'm invited. I want to spectate. I want to be color black. I gotta have the god rights in that game. So I can see everything.
There you go. You'll run the game. All right. Awesome.
Well, I want to go ahead and have everybody rate us on your podcast app of choice, especially Apple Podcasts and iTunes. You can find us on Twitter at SpaceCatsPod. You can find us on Facebook, Space Cats Peace Turtles. You can find our posts every single week on the Twilight Imperium subreddit.
Wait. I want to throw out a gimmick for Apple Podcasts this week.
It's been a good thing.
If you want to rate us this week and refer to us as the most competitive Twilight Imperium podcast, putting all those other Twilight Imperium podcasts to shame. Why not do that? That sounds fun.
That's a good one.
We are. Have you ever realized that we're in such a specific genre of podcast that we are alone? We are literally Like we're like our own little subgenre of podcast.
You can also join our Patreon.
It's true. It is true.
You can be just like Tyler and have an episode all to yourself if you join our Patreon and become a Space Kitty, or you can be a Goodyin Brotherhood member and play games with us. All kinds of benefits. You can join our Discord to gain access to those benefits, but also you can just be on our Discord for free and hang out and talk to all of us. Hunter Donaldson, who are you?
Yeah, so I do comedy and produce comedy, and this Saturday in Portland is the best comedy show that you can see all year, amateur-wise, anyways. Amateur comedy. Well, not amateur comedy. Let's call it semi-pro comedy. And it's going to be on July 27th at Desert Island Studios. There's $10 ticket. Sorry, it's sometimes we had to pay rental fees, so like we had to charge tickets. But and they've actually been selling pretty well. So like if you are on the fence about coming or not, I would encourage you to buy your tickets sooner rather than later. We still have some available, but like they are going pretty fast. The lineup is the best I could possibly hope for, including we actually added another comedian, a very like old Portland, super solid comedian that hosts a regular show at UCB in LA. His name is Andrew Meeshan. We have Curtis Cook, who is he is a correspondent on the Jim Jeffrey Show and also a writer on that show from the beginning. And we have Milan Patel, who is my favorite comedian in the whole world. So there you go. All that for $10, and then also all of the other people on the list are just the best comedians in Portland, and it's hosted by me and my friend Jake. There we go.
Nice. Tyler, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This was a great one to have, and I'm sorry it took so very, very, very long to get it into your hands.
Not a problem at all. If anything, we were able to just premeditate a bit more. So I think hopefully it was enjoyable for the listeners, but I think it was fun to make it with you guys. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity. Looking forward to meeting you guys in person at GenCon.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
2 weeks. You just made my heart sink. I'm
Also,
out.
GenCon's coming up. Check
man.
us out at that.
Freaking out. Oh, yeah, we didn't even mention that. Show Thursday at 3 p.m. at GenCon. If you're there, come see us live.
Come see us live. And also, you can just come see us. Like, you can just come. Like,
Say hello.
You can also just say hi. I mean, you'd have to find us, but you can find us.
And you'll now and you'll be able to meet the now world famous Tyler Welch. So come shake his hand as well.
World
and
famous
thank
Tyler
him.
Welch. EJ's gonna be there, like working and carrying gear.
Yin for Life is gonna be there, probably following us in the shadows. I don't know. It's gonna be haunting.
Yeah. Connor will be around, so you can,
Can we end this show before we just list all of our friends?
I want to leave some of our friends out, actually.
Root will be there.
Oh, yeah. Root will be there. We can't leave Root out. And then that's it. I'm done. That's it. That's
Nobody
all.
else of importance.
There's not going to be anybody else there. Uh-oh.
Thank you for listening to Space Cat's Peace Turtles, and thanks to Ben Prunty for the use of his music. You can find more at benpruntymusic.com and benprunty.bandcamp.com. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.